Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where you'll hear stories about people who simply think they're above everybody else and they can do what they want. Like this lady right here. So I know I've shared this before like 100 episodes ago, but this is by far the most entitled thing I've ever seen in my life. So this lady right here uses bread as knee pads when she's looking at other bread. It's so ridiculous that it's hilarious. Guys, I couldn't even fathom using bread as knee pads. And of course, she walks away leaving the mushed bread. Incredible, the entitlement is incredible. So, if you think that's entitled, wait until you hear the stories today, guys. So the first story, a Karen tells a store manager how to price things. The second story, OP's parents want access to her personal medical records to shame her. The third story is an email submission from a listener about a raging Karen in a bookstore. And we'll finish up with how a Karen damages a $55,000 wheelchair and don't give a damn about it. My friends, I do hope you stay for the stories today, and hit that subscribe button for future stories. Let's dive in. So, it finally happened. I witnessed my first Karen. So my boyfriend and I went to the local mini market to get some pizza dough. Thankfully, there's not much of a line, so we get on and wait our turn. Suddenly, we see and hear this lady, henceforth known as Karen. Unfortunately, she doesn't have the haircut. She goes off on this poor cashier girl complaining about the sandwich from the deli. I'm guessing she didn't know the price until she rung it up, because we suddenly hear, $7? Are you kidding? My boyfriend and I look at each other like, oh god, it's about to go down. Karen says, I want to see a manager. This is ridiculous. The cashier goes and comes back with a manager like 2 seconds later, since it's a small store. I gotta give credit though, this guy doesn't back down. Karen is complaining about the price of the sandwich, and the manager is explaining that the weight of the meat in the sandwich equals the price, and she's not having it. Karen says, I can get it for much cheaper at the deli down the street. So in my head, I'm thinking, then why are you here? Karen then says, look, I'm still gonna buy it, but look at it. There isn't much meat. There's no way it's $7. So the manager tells her, I'm sorry you don't like our prices, but that's how much it is with the weight of the meat, cheese, and spread. Karen says, but that's far too high. Let me show you the sandwich. Miss, if you open the container, you have to buy it. Karen then says, I will still pay for it, but let me show you what I mean. So Karen proceeds to open the container and show him the contents of the sandwich. She opens the sandwich and goes, look at this. There's like 2 slices of meat in here. There's barely anything. You probably get this meat at bulk prices. And look at the cheese. It resembles processed sliced cheese. So my manager tells her, ma'am, unfortunately that's the prices that we set. You either buy it or you don't. And now that you've opened the sandwich and you've had your fingers in it, you have to pay for it. Karen then says, I am never coming here again. But do you see how the sandwich is not worth $7? The manager tells her, I don't make the prices, I'm sorry, miss. The manager then rolls his eyes and leaves, and this lady is now berating this cashier who has nothing to do with pricing, saying, would you pay for something like this? Look at it. So, my first job when I was 17 was a cashier for the supermarket, so I immediately empathized with the girl. There's so much you want to say but can't, because you have to keep that customer service smile in order to get that paycheck. Then I hear this ridiculousness. Karen says, what happened to the people who used to own this place? They would have never priced it like this. Greed is ruining everything. This sandwich is easily $4 a sandwich. Why even lie and price it at $7? So the cashier is speechless and doesn't even know how to respond. Karen says, I'm gonna make a complaint. This is ridiculous. $7 for a tiny sandwich. Okay, so I've been to this store many times. The sandwiches aren't big, but there's a decent amount of meat in there, and it depends on what kind of sandwich you get. At this point, I've had enough, and so has the boyfriend. We don't want to make a scene, and I'm not very good with confrontation. Boyfriend and I go and pay, and the exit is right where the Karen and the cashier are. We get to the exit, and just before we leave, I shout, bye, Karen. Karen turns her head to look at me with bewildered eyes. I walk off, and boyfriend looks at the lady with an annoyed and disapproving look. And it may have been a bit cowardly, but I'm still kinda proud of it, especially when I heard one of the cashiers laugh. Boyfriend and I laugh all the way back to the car. I don't know what happened after we left, but from the look of that lady's face, I think she realized just how she looked. My friends, leave it up to an entitled Karen to dictate how things should be priced, right? I'm so surprised she didn't say it should have been free at that point. And the fact that she opened the sandwich to show the contents and to try to justify the pricing was too much was absolutely absurd. If you don't like the pricing, don't pay for it. Simple as that. There was no point in her opening the sandwich and making a scene about it. Let's hope she never sets foot in those fancy restaurants where they charge you like $100 for like a bite of food. I really think her head would explode at that point. In healthcare, one of the most difficult things to deal with are family members of patients. They are understandably angry, upset, grieving, devastated, and often feel helpless. Most of the time, I try to understand this and not get too annoyed when a family causes problems. But these parents were on another level. So, one of my patients was an 18-year-old woman who had a pelvic infection. She got very sick and required a moderate stay in the hospital. She was a dream patient though. She was open, honest, and generally a loving person. Her parents were none of these things. Every day, they would come in and start demanding this, or that, or the other thing from the nurses. They wanted an extra bed in the room so the mother could stay overnight, and honestly, it's COVID times, and you're lucky to even be allowed to visit. They were rude to the student nurse who was doing their daughter's OBS, to the point that the charge nurse moved the student nurse to a different set of patients to get her away from them. But when the doctors were around, they were the sweetest people you've ever met, right up until we were out of sight. They were disruptive, loud, and just generally obnoxious people. So thankfully their daughter was aware of their behavior and had informed us that she didn't want them to be told anything about her condition unless she approved it. She was a legal adult, so she was entitled to her privacy. This wasn't a huge issue to begin with, as she shared most of the details with them. But then, her mother Googled pelvic infections and discovered that, oh my god, sometimes they can be caused by sexually transmitted infections. Cue the dramatic music. So, as far as she was then concerned, we had screwed up and gotten the diagnosis wrong, because there was no way that there was any possibility that her little angel had even thought of having sex. So, at this point, they demanded to see their daughter's medical records so they could prove that we were lying about the infection. Politely telling them to screw off was the highlight of my week. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. They came in the next day with legal papers saying they would try to sue to demand we hand over the medical records. It turns out that they had lied to the lawyer, because the papers were for minors that are still under guardianship of the parents, not a grown-ass woman. They then threatened to sue each of us individually. And then, it gets even worse. They then tried to get some crackpot doctor in to check her hymen. Thankfully, the daughter screamed bloody murder when the guy tried to examine her, which resulted in me getting to watch security escort the lot of them off the premises. I honestly hope she presses charges for that. Guys, what an insane story. You would think that a doctor would know better than to just go against the patient's wishes to the point where the girl had to scream for him to stop. I can't even believe that OP said the guy tried to examine her. Are you guys getting some sort of creepy doctor vibes here? I really hope the girl's doing okay though. There's no telling what those parents will try once she's away from the hospital and at home again. So, this was back when the Twilight books were finishing up. I was a 21-year-old college guy working full-time and school full-time. Needless to say, my life revolved in books. So my store wanted to have a big party for the midnight release of the final book. So our manager, who always wore polos and khakis, pulls us into a meeting. He says, "We're having a prom-themed party. I want everybody to wear their best." So recently my uncle had bought me a 3-piece suit for interviews, so I was excited to wear it and my Lord of the Rings themed tie. So on the night of the party, we started letting people in at 10 p.m. to enjoy trivia, games, and to get in line. Our store had a voucher system. Anytime the month before release, you can buy a voucher and turn it in to get the book after release. We started lining up people about 11 o'clock. Our manager calls me over and says, "OP, go grab the racks of books and bring them to the counters." So I run to the back and start pushing out those large rolling racks of books to the front. Now, here's some important information. If a book was sold before the release date, our company would charge our store for 10 copies and revoke our voucher system. On my 5th or 6th trip up to the front, I hear, "Excuse me?" I turn to see a woman and her very obviously pregnant daughter. She walks up to me out of the line and says, "Hey, my daughter's pregnant and feels bad. Could we pick up the book now? I have a voucher." I explain the company's policy and punishment for not following along, and she huffs and says, "My daughter can't stand for another hour." I told her, "Well, ma'am, I can get a chair from the cafe." And she says, "No, I want that book." She reaches for the book and I push the cart out of her reach. Now, I'm a 6'5" guy, so it rolled a bit further than I intended. So fast forward to about 30 minutes till midnight. A friend in line yells, "OP, call an ambulance." Me and the manager run back with our portable phone. The daughter's water broke. Luckily, we were close to the local hospital, so they were there in 5 minutes. The Karen mom meets me at the door before she leaves, and she snarls, "Can I have the goddamn book now, idiot?" About 5 minutes till midnight, I hear complaining, and my manager, who is setting up the system, motions for me to see what's wrong. I run up, and the Karen's back. She left her grandchild's birth for a teen romance novel, and she demands her place in line. I explain that her leaving the property forfeits her place in line. She has to go to the back, which is now outside. She complains and yells for a few moments before going to the back. Finally, midnight has come and gone, and we scan the vouchers and hand back the books. About 1 a.m., I look up and see Karen. Well, there are 6 registers. There's good odds that I won't get her. But there's no luck. She waits and comes to my counter and slams the voucher down. She then demands, "Give me my book now." I scan it and hand it to her, and she walks off, and I call out, "Ma'am, would you like the voucher as a bookmark?" And she flips me off. Boy, oh boy, as much as I wish this was the end. So the next morning, we all learned that a lot of the books had double print errors, which made several pages unreadable. The next afternoon, I come in wearing my usual band tee and blue jeans. I hear my manager talking, and he says, "I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm the only night manager, and I don't remember you." Then I hear the familiar voice. She says, "No, he was a tall, dark-haired kid." I come around the aisle and see Karen. She sees me and points, "Him!" At this point, my patience with her has ended, and my sarcasm has topped off. I said, "Miss, how's the grandbaby? Enjoying the book?" And she loses it. My manager shakes his head and says, "That's OP, the cashier." And she says, "No, last night he was wearing a suit. He was pretending to be a manager. He told me all of these rules." She recites what I mentioned earlier, and the manager says, "Well, ma'am, that's all correct." She then demands a corporate number. My manager, who has my back at this point, motioned at me and says, "OP, clock in and get her this number." I walk to the front with her behind me, and she says, "I'm gonna get you fired. You'd better start job hunting, you smart-ass cocky punk." So I get to the front and get her the number. She huffs and says, "Nothing to say?" I look her in the eyes, clasp my hands together, and in the most desperate voice I say, "Please, please call corporate and tell them I'm doing my job properly and abiding by store rules. I desperately need a raise." Never heard back from that, but I gained the nickname Wildman from a few coworkers and management for my sarcastic responses that morning. Thank you so much for your submission, Daniel, and I love your personality, my man. Fighting Karens with a quick wit and sarcasm sprinkled in with a little bit of humor, you sound just like me. Minus the quick wit. My friends, if you're listening and want to share stories, my email is in the description box. Dear Entitled Mother, thank you so much for your complete and utter lack of patience when getting on the bus, which resulted in breaking part of my $55,000 wheelchair and me needing to call the police for help. So, I was on the bus tonight heading to a workshop that I was fairly excited for. Things were great until slightly before my stop when 2 adults got on, one with a toddler and the other one wheeling a stroller. So, it is strict corporate policy that all strollers must be folded before being brought onto the bus. But not enough drivers actually enforce it, and this was one of those monster Cadillac strollers to boot. She had brought her unfolded stroller on the bus, and seeing the front entirely occupied by disabled people, including myself, she decided to push past toward the back. Only, her behemoth of a stroller wouldn't fit in the space available, and she started ramming it along my wheelchair to plow it through. I shouted, "Hey, watch it!" She ignores me and keeps trying to squeeze through, and I say, "Careful, I can feel you tugging at stuff." The entitled woman doesn't stop, and finally she managed to push through and moved back. I fumed for the next few blocks, pushed the button for my stop, and turned on my wheelchair. And then I got an error that says left brake disconnected. I tried it again, and repeated errors. I was thinking, oh my god. So the next several minutes were spent with the bus pulled over, passengers getting mad at me for causing delay, while I panicked trying to figure out how to get off the bus. Finally, a guy flipped my electric release switch on and off several times, and that managed to convince my chair to work for me to get off the bus and get about 15 feet away before my chair suddenly turned itself off. I turned it back on and nothing happened. It started throwing up a charger inhibit error. which basically is the error you get when you try to start moving when you're still plugged into a wall outlet. So the next hour was a progression of events that saw me sitting on the ground with the back of my chair opened up, as I went through everything trying to figure out what the ever-loving hell was going on. I even called the police because I wasn't sure how I'd be able to get home, as my wheelchair company doesn't have after-hour service. In the end, I discovered that 2 different things had gotten disconnected, and when I fixed them, my chair started up just fine. The lovely officer helped me get my chair cover back on my chair, and more importantly, helped me get safely back into my chair. So none of this would have happened if that entitled mother had just taken 1 goddamn second to fold her stroller up. Or, I don't know, stopped when I asked her to. But no, she was far too important to do such a basic task like that. And yes, my wheelchair is actually $55,000. I know that sounds like a lot, but given that according to the order form I just looked at, a joystick cover alone is $85, and it doesn't surprise me at all. It has 3 different tilt and adjustment settings that drives the cost up enormously. I love shouting at people who drive too close to me that my wheelchair costs more than their car. My friends, I had no idea that wheelchairs could get up that high in pricing. What a crazy lady though, she probably just sat there clueless at why the hell the bus wasn't moving and didn't know that she was the cause of it. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /entitled people. Guys, if you enjoyed the stories today, do hit the thumbs up. And if you missed the last episode of our /entitled people, an entitled Karen throws her keys at OP's head and expects him to park her car. It's ridiculous. Check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you.